Hi everyone, you are very welcome to the next episode in our Work From Anywhere series. Today we have got a very special lineup. We've got Debner, Bhagyashree Pancholy and Frank Dissen. We're going to be going under the hood of all the tax and employment law and compliance risks of work from anywhere. And next week we've also got a great lineup. We're going to have Tayo Roxon, Joanne Mangan and Paul Bennett, moderated by RD Crowd. The topic is going to be culture and community. So stay tuned for episode number 2. Hi everyone, you are very welcome to the next episode in our Work From Anywhere series. A massive thank you for everyone in the community. You've been such a great support of this series since we kicked it off. I'd like to let you know that you can ask any questions that you like to any of our panelists during it, so please feel free to let us know any questions that you have. A couple of things I would also like to say as well, just in terms of housekeeping. I think we're going to be talking a lot about some of the tax risks and legal risks and beyond of work from anywhere, going right into the how you can make work from anywhere a reality or not, and whether it's a myth or reality. But basically, the key thing I want to make a very strong point on is that none of this should be seen as very specific tax or legal advice. You've got to speak to the tax and legal experts on this, basically. And that's what we're all here for. But in any case, moving on to work from anywhere, is it a myth or reality? We've got a great group lined up here today. We've got Frank Dissen of WTS Global. We've got Bhagyashree Pancholy of All Remotely. And we've got Debner, top 100 most admired global mobility professionals in the world. So I'd like to invite them all onto the screen now at the moment. First of all, thank you all for being a part of this series. I really, really appreciate it. Maybe it's good just to kick us off. Maybe, Chris, do you want to kick us off with a short little introduction, please?
Sure, pleased to be here. I'm the only non-compliance person together with the other guests. My background is actually human resources and strategy. And in that capacity, I've worked for over 20 years, actually, advising companies in devising mobility strategies, policies, and processes. So always advising companies on how they treat actually their employees. And I'm an independent advisor based in Zurich, and most recently, I am advising companies in strategies for work from anywhere.
Great, Bhagyashree. Then, would you like to give us a quick intro?
Thank you, Joan. Hello, everyone. I am Bhagyashree. I am the owner and founder at All Remotely, a one-stop solution which helps teams transition to remote or hybrid in a safe, efficient, and compliant manner. And I'm also the general counsel at Lano, an EOR that would actually make you hire talent and retain talent overseas. My background is basically law, so I have been in this industry for the last over a decade now, actually, and I have been head of remote operations for a globally distributed hybrid remote team.
Great, and I guess, Frank, would you like to give us a quick bit of background as well?
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, as Chris just mentioned, maybe I'm the compliance guy, but don't worry, I'm not the type of man who is always saying, no, this is not gonna to work. So I'm an attorney at law in Germany. I'm a tax advisor in Germany. I'm dealing with global mobility for the last nearly 20 years. Started my career with a Big Four company, Ernst & Young. There I met Chris, former days. Well, since nearly 10 years, I'm with WTS. It's the 5th largest German tax advisor company, and what makes us unique is that we are not offering any audit services. So we are never restricted. We can offer the full branch of services, and we are doing so in the area of cross-border employment. So legal advice, tax advice, including corporate tax, transfer pricing, personal income tax, but the legal aspects as social security, labor law, and so on. I think we have many issues to discuss today in this area.
I think so, 100%. And I think that's a good segue into a recent survey that we did from the Work From Anywhere team. We did a survey a couple of months ago trying to ask both employees and employers what the biggest pain points of Work From Anywhere would be. And from an individual perspective, the number one pain point that came out of it was tax. The number 2 was interruption to kids' education. From the employer perspective, tax was also the number 1 issue, followed by duty of care. But there's also many other risks as well. I mean, you've got employment law and many other aspects to it as well, which is why this particular group is such a great fit for this particular episode. But if we look at it, I mean, we've all seen recently, I think there was been a big shift in the Facebook announcement and their vision for the next 10 years around work from anywhere. But then to hear the announcement from Deloitte, it was limited to Deloitte UK, but I think that was also quite a signal as well of intent, let's say. I mean, if you take a big picture, big step back, I'd like to ask each of you, maybe Chris, starting with you, is work from anywhere, is it a myth or is it a reality? What's your take?
I would clearly say that if you come to this question, it's really up to companies making decisions that suit their uniqueness as a company and their cultures, which will create the reality. It's not like that it's a myth or a reality to me. I mean, it is something that is still in the making, so to say, and a final verdict has not been done on that yet.
And what would you say to that, Bhagyashree, as well? Is it a myth or is it a reality? What have you seen?
Being a true lawyer, if I were to take this term anywhere literally, that would be very, very expansive. That would literally mean anywhere and everywhere in the world, which is legally not possible, not even from the tax perspective, not even from the employment law perspective. And again, coming back to the fact that this term was actually used many a times over last year and this year. And this is not what we are doing right now. It's not remote work. This is just a knee-jerk reaction to a pandemic and emergency situation where we are. So basing your decision to allow your employees to work from anywhere or not, deciding on the bandwagon that started last year, I wouldn't be, I would actually go on to say that it's not the right decision. You need to wait till things become normal and then make that decision. So yes, anywhere in the literal sense, not possible. Anywhere in a compliant manner with a list of companies that you've decided, definitely possible.
Interesting. And what would you say to that as well, Frank? What's your take from the tax side of it, or more generally?
Yeah, I would agree. We are on the way. So it's just the starting point. It's really in the beginning. I mean, there's a lot of questions not solved, and the compliance risks need to be seen. That's for sure. But I really hope that the companies will, be open to this concept of work from anywhere, because it's a huge benefit for the employees at least. But I still think for the companies as well. And the compliance is, from my point of view, if you are aware of it, you can solve it, and that should be the goal. And we are at the starting point.
We're at the starting point. I think it's a fair point. And I think if you look at all of that, what's a bit tricky is that in certain industries, particularly those from a fixed location, work from anywhere never really will be hugely applicable. But then industries where the talent are highly mobile, you can see there's an urgency to try and figure this out sooner rather than later. Otherwise, they'll lose talent. So I guess that kind of, on the one hand, you prefer from a compliance side to try and wait and see where this lands out. But on the other hand, if competitors are already offering this, even promoting it, even if it's not in reality behind the scenes, then there's that challenge as well. So maybe that links into, Chris, how do you see work from anywhere from a strategic talent mobility perspective? Like, do you see companies looking at this seriously?
Right. I see it currently. It's the big topic. It's almost a hype in the discussions in HR. And an interesting aspect of that is that the discussion is not led typically on the level of a head of mobility. It's going beyond that. I mean, the people that I used to talk for all my career with heads of mobility. Now I'm talking with group heads of HR, CHROs. And in the projects that I ran so far, I know that the HR people made a suggestion to the executive board of a company to come to a conclusion. That means that the topic is really elevated. Now, what we have to see is that the whole topic of work from anywhere is piggybacking, as I call it, on the work from home topic. We are talking about a post-pandemic reality. But you can imagine if a company has a work from home strategy where they require the people to be in the office 3 days a week, you can forget about it in terms of, equal treatment of your employees, that they allow someone just by his own choice to stay for 6 months in another country. Therefore, companies should first solve that problem, which is a big discussion by itself, even a bigger one because it applies to more people. Then they can make a decision to what degree they do it. Now, what I see is it's currently completely unknown territory for companies. There is no way to benchmark. You can't look left or right and see what others have been doing. You can't see what is a successful approach towards that. You see the extreme examples from Spotify to other companies who simply ban it completely. But what I think is very important, in all that spectrum from forbidding it to allowing it, and anything in between, what you should not do as a company is to ignore the topic, because doing nothing is really not an option. That itself comes with massive risks for an organization.
Yeah, it's very tricky. And maybe going back into where work from anywhere sits within organizations, just to link in with that. I mean, part of the challenge is that, pre-pandemic, we had business travel, sat within the corporate travel management department, and that's where the business travelers going on short-term stays went. But then, obviously the expats, the permanent transfers went, via global mobility. But this work from anywhere, these people going for more than 28 days and less than 365, how that evolves in organizations, where it sits, is also going to be a very interesting one to look at. But then, I suppose, looking at from a compliance perspective, then, Frank, particularly like tax and social security, like what are the key risks to take into consideration? How do you see companies addressing this, let's say?
Yeah, of course. We already mentioned in the beginning that there are tax issues. That's for sure. I mean, from a company perspective, everybody is always telling immediately, well, we can't do this because we have a permanent establishment risk. So the PE issue is the biggest fear of most of the companies, most of the clients I do know. And well, there is a risk, of course, and it depending on so many different factors that you need to be aware. And the second issue in taxation is the personal income tax, of course. This is more from the individual side. So the employee himself, if he will be switching tax residency to another country, then of course he will have an unknown situation. He will be confronted with new law he needs to be aware of. So these are the main aspects: the corporate taxes with PE, the individual taxation for the employee himself, and never forget about social security, because social taxes in most cases are asked to be paid by the employer on behalf of the employee. So the companies cannot ignore that. If a person is switching countries for work, then it could happen quite easily that the social security law of that new country is applicable. And if so, the former or the original country's social security may not be covering that person anymore, or double contributions need to be paid. And this is the full responsibility of the employer. So both taxation and social security, but even more, I mean, we will talk later on about the labor law as well.
Oh, I think your head would be just spinning with all the risks. And then you look at European perspective, the Posted Workers Directive, and all the additional, compliance challenges. I mean, I really don't envy global mobility leaders at this point in time. On the one hand, it's the biggest challenge from dealing with these headaches. But on the other hand, it's also a huge opportunity for them. In many ways, it's their moment, because they know a lot of these risks. They've handled a lot of them. And if they can get that sweet spot, get the balance right, I think there's a huge opportunity. But you did mention, for example, the employment law side of it, Frank. Bhagyashree, how do you see that from an employment law and remote work law perspective? How do you see as the key risks to watch out for? And what are the key risks to take into consideration? And I suppose more importantly, what kind of practical solutions have you seen developed?
There are actually, John, what I've started to see ever since last year is that there's enormous list. People are moving out of one jurisdiction, tax and legal, into another. And one famous example is what has happened in the US. There were employees who were living in New Jersey, but were employed for New York-based corporations. So not only they created their company liable for taxation in New Jersey, that was a different state, but also the fact that, there were a lot of labor law compliance challenges. And quickly, I actually want to first begin with the first one, and that is the discrimination that is set in amongst employees. Now, not everybody in an organization has the cognitive ability, the home environment, and the right visas and work permit to work from different jurisdictions. They will have to either come to the office or stick to the same legal and tax jurisdictions. That has essentially created two classes of employees within an organization, one who can work remotely and one who can't. Then there's this another one where the one to whom remote work could be offered, or more flexibility could be offered, the others to whom it can't be. And then when you talk about global organizations, there's two classes emerging there as well. So if I were to take this recent announcement by Nokia, a very popular phone manufacturing company from Finland, I guess, or Norway. So they made this announcement that they are allowing 3 days working from home for their employees in Norway, Budapest, Paris, and Singapore. But rest of the other offices, country offices, need to work from the office. So I see a huge disparity where a lot of Western European countries and North American employees and countries are being allowed to work from home or work from anywhere. And then there's a whole chunk of population that lives in Asia, Africa, and Latin America or South America that isn't allowed to do that. Then another interesting thing that has come up over the last year was that there have been so many amendments made by different countries in their existing labor and employment laws, or new remote work laws have come up, like in Ireland, in Croatia, in Turkey, in Poland, and certain other countries. And none of them actually say that teleworkers, the term they use, because they don't want to be there, you have to be very cautious of using the right terms, and we'll come to that later on, but they use the term teleworkers, and none of those teleworkers are supposed to work from anywhere. They pretty much, the laws fix a location of work. So that could be the home, the office, the co-working space, or something else that the employee and the employer mutually agrees. But then those locations need to be assessed for workplace health and safety and ergonomic assessments. That pretty much is a big barrier, because what if there's to be an injury? What if somebody works from a beach and a volleyball comes and hits them? They would sue the company that, you know what, this is a workplace injury, and then there would be a gigantic rise in workplace compensation claims.
Yeah, great point. There's a couple of questions that are coming through. I'm going to have to deal with them here. I think there's some great questions. The first one is from Bindu. If it asks us to Bhagyashree, is this going to be an employee's choice or an employer's decision? How do you see that balance?
I think it would be. I think it would be and I know Chris would have a better answer at return of investment over this. But I have started to see in my consultancy for my clients, it's a decision of both. Somewhere the employer has to be lenient. Somewhere the employee needs to understand that there are certain liabilities and certain compliance issues that won't allow them to work from anywhere. So it has to be a mix of both.
And I think maybe just align to that, one of the things that I've definitely seen is, we've literally been around for literally hundreds of thousands of years, and we've had a traditional kind of a hierarchy in work where you've had the bosses on top and then the employees down at the bottom. The bosses have told the rest of the organization what to do. But specifically around remote work, at that point a couple of months ago, when many companies said we're going back to work to the office, let's say in September, I think you kind of saw that pyramid turned upside down, where a lot of people basically said, no, we're not going back to the office. And so I think that could be, I don't know if that's a structural or a temporary issue, but I think coming back to the talent mobility, let's say, angle, Chris, I mean, how do you weave all this together into a coherent global mobility strategy? I mean, how can you keep on top of the risks and weigh the compliance costs against the employee benefits? I mean, specifically coming back here to Jay's point here, you said work from anywhere will become a necessary negotiating point for top talent throughout many industries. Top employees are becoming less focused on compensation and more focused on flexibility. A great question. How do you see that, for example? How do you weave this into a coherent strategy?
Let me give the strategy first and then go into Jay's question, because I agree it's a good one. I mean, I've done it in the past, and I would say it is possible for a company to get clarity. I mean, what does a company want? A company wants to have, if they take a risk, they want to have a controlled risk. They want to have a transparent risk. And if a company takes their responsibility for their employees serious, they also want to have an informed employee who works from another country, who, if a company is willing to take a risk that would also affect the employee, that they would make their employee aware of that. Now, how do you do it? I mean, it's a balancing of the benefits that a company gets out of it in terms of employer image, etc., attractiveness, retention, the risks, and the costs, respectively, the administration that comes with handling and the cost that comes with handling the risks. And Now, what you need to do, I mean, you basically need two things in a company. You need a set of the right stakeholders who can make that decision, who have a say in that, who can represent the company culture and the company idea. And the second fact is what you need is they have to see the facts. Everybody around the table, if you have a stakeholder workshop, needs to see the facts. What are the risks? What are the benefits? And needs to be educated, so to say, on that. Because what I've seen, there's a huge ignorance out there where people, and ignorance is sometimes, I was corrected the wrong word, I should say innocence, when people are talking about the 183-day rule, for example, which is a myth. Truly, that's no reality. And so a lot of people who think that it's so easy to travel and work from somewhere else, I mean, they all need to be educated on what the reality, what the facts are. They need to see how much their company would validate actually the benefits versus the effort that they have to put in to mitigate the risks or take the risks. And usually stakeholder workshop, have those people together, do an education. If you ideally you have facilitators like myself and someone like Frank, you know, who can, or someone who can cover the compliance side, but also someone who has the bigger picture of what it takes, the strategic picture. And then you can come to a decision which is like a business case for change, which also has this ability that you can take that to the board, ask for an investment. Theoretically, you know, you need to stack up on, and having another one that staffs your mobility or your travel department to deal with that. And so the business case for change is basically the way, and bringing the people together and inform them.
So a very good question on that coming from Rowena. She said, what about these stakeholder workshops? Can you give us a hint on what are the kind of things that are tackled in a workshop like that, Chris?
All right. I mean, in the workshop, the first step, what you're doing is basically you try to bring everyone on the same level and the same level of understanding. It's a multidisciplinary workshop. As I mentioned before, there are HR people, mobility folks, travel people, maybe legal people as well, maybe someone from the corporate tax department, even the business is sometimes in there. And they all need the same understanding of what a tax risk, a legal risk, and so on is. They need an understanding of the benefits. And when we're all on the same level, then we're also talking about actually what are the workarounds for these risks? Because you need to put a price tag, so to say, to the workarounds that enable you to evaluate actually if the benefits are worth that. Am I willing to pay the price, so to say? And my experience is in the course of such a workshop that people very quickly say, in our company, impossible, or they say, yes, this is the way and this is the approach we want to take. And I would always stress that as an advisor, an advisor should always go in completely open, you know, do not expect the outcome. I mean, be happy what the client decides. It needs to be a decision that suits to them.
That's a very, very good point. I know, Bhagyashree, coming back to Jay's statement as well, you wanted to come in there on that as well. Please feel free to jump in. Sure.
So I quickly wanted to say that if you remember what happened with Facebook when they initially announced their work from home policy, and they said that if employees are going to move out of San Francisco or California, they'll have to accept lower salaries, and there was a huge backlash. Right? But that is actually true, because the moment you cross a jurisdiction and enter another jurisdiction, the entire compensation and benefits package requires restructuring. That may mean that you will have to accept lower salaries. That may mean that you will be taxed more than what you were being taxed, or pay differently for your social benefits, perks, and other benefits that you enjoy at the company. And then, if you remember, there was this another statement that came from Washington Post CEO, where she said that if employees were allowed to work from anywhere and everywhere, then I fear that some employees would be turned into contractors. And she was again, scrutinized. Her statements were scrutinized left, right, and center, and she also kind of received some flagging there. But even she was right. What I've started to see is, one, before 2020, a lot of companies that were remote and are highly reputed were already misclassifying their workers. So they were essentially employees, but then they were, being tagged as contractors on their contracts, and they were not paid their right dues. But then look at it now. People would be more employers, just to save on the compliance cost and not to take those risks, would be more happy or I think would be happier and more willing, rather, I would use this term, to turn the employees into contractors and then say, if you want to work from anywhere, we are not ready to take on all that risk and compliance. So you become contractors and you work from wherever you want to. As an individual, are you ready to take that? As an employee, are you ready to do that? So it has to come midway by both the parties. It will not be any more dictatorship of the employers, but it will also not be a thing that employees can easily, or the union would come up and say, and the employer will have to rescind. There'll be a midway there.
No, 100%. I think that's a fascinating point. You're also seeing it in the likes of the UK with IR35 that pushes the basically the obligation onto the employer. But I don't know, Chris, because I want to go onto the tax side with Frank as well. Chris, did you want to come in there on that as well?
Very, very briefly to Jay's question. I mean, I said initially, this is a time for innovations. This is a time which is unprecedented. And what he said, you know, and also with the question, are people willing to sacrifice some salary for having the opportunity? I have no one seen so far been talking about that. I might have to write an article about it. If you have a flexible pay scheme, why don't you turn work from anywhere into an employee benefit that can make it cost neutral for the employer?
That's a great example. I mean, a very specific survey in that was done recently, a couple of weeks ago. And I think a lot of us are aware of it, but basically about 1,000 of the tech employees across various different tech companies in the US were basically asked, if you went back into the office and were given a $30,000 pay increase, or you got to continue working from home with no pay increase, which would you choose? And if I remember correctly, give or take around 70% said they prefer to sacrifice the pay increase, but have the flexibility of work from home. But then it would be curious to say, if you were able to offer work from anywhere in a specific number of countries, what would that be worth as a kind of an employee benefit? But I'm also conscious then as well, if you go into it, Frank, on the tax side, you know, what kind of practical solutions have you seen adopted by companies when it comes to work from anywhere? And like things like, for example, digital nomad visas now, some of them include wraparounds for tax, and the evolution of temporary assignments. What are you seeing in that space?
Yeah, and I think there was a question from one of the participants coming into this direction, if there is anything the countries are offering already. And well, we have to say it's not only a few countries. There is a competition between countries already, because there are so many countries offering the digital nomad visas. But not only that, there are some countries who are combining it with tax exemption. So we have seen Croatia, where you have no taxes, zero tax, if you have the digital nomad visa. I mean, they cannot influence the home country taxation. So you will at least have to give up your domicile in your original home country to really enjoy the tax haven, I guess. But there are so many countries with really low taxation. I mean, Romania is a 10% flat tax. Italy has 70% tax-free for the first 5 years. Greece, 7% flat tax or 50% free off for the self-employed individuals. Portugal with the non-habitual resident status, 20% flat. It's not only because of the work from anywhere. The rules have been there before, but now people are looking after it and really trying to decide, where can I go next? And if you are doing it correctly, and if you are doing it smart, then you can profit from all these low with zero taxation countries. And I mean, the classic countries are the islands, Barbados, Bahamas, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, all tax-free. And I mean, Dubai, Doha, Qatar, Oman, many other countries where you can go and work and no tax at all. But well, there is this competition between countries. And on the other side, there are countries who are already thinking about rules to still have a piece of it. I mean, in Germany, we have something called extended unlimited tax liability. So even though you have given up your residency in Germany, you are subject to unlimited taxation for some further years. I mean, this is not new, but it comes into effect maybe much more often now because of this work from anywhere topic. And well, we have seen the minimum corporate tax on a global basis. We are just discussing with the G7 and in the next month G20. I'm curious. Maybe in the future we will have a minimum individual taxation as well.
That's a fascinating one. I'm seeing as well some of the comments there about in some states in the US that are zero tax as well. I thought that was a fascinating question from Claire Kumar. She said, do you think countries will change their tax policies to facilitate more movement? And a great example of this was the Deputy Prime Minister of Ireland, Leo Varadkar, who basically said that the high marginal tax rates may have to reduce to keep the, let's say, high income earners who are quite mobile. So this is a very tricky one, and you start running into, one of the points that Bhagyashree made earlier on about this kind of two-tier workforce as well, and how do you deal with that? So I don't know how you see that coming in. Chris, I see you want to jump in there as well. Please go ahead.
Well, I just want to say, let's not focus too much on tax. Tax is probably one of those few topics that can be where the risk can be delegated to the employee to a certain degree. Whereas, it's nice if you're in a tax-free Bermuda sitting by the beach, but then we have the labor law issues. We have, if you're sitting in the Côte d'Azur in France, you have a French labor law that your employer might not like if he comes from the US or somewhere. You have the health insurance issues. There's a host of other issues besides tax that should not be ignored. That's just what I want to put out there.
Yeah, very, very good point. Very, very good point. I think it's taking a holistic approach to it, as you say yourself, Chris. And then Bhagyashree, looking at the PR, what's been fascinating is every second company, it feels like, is announcing a work from anywhere policy. Have you been able to look under the hood, Bhagyashree, to get a sense of whether they're actually implementing this? And it looks like companies are using the term interchangeably. Like, what are the consequences of that?
Definitely. And this is actually a good point, John. The thing is that all of these companies are announcing work from anywhere policies, but in essence, when you read that they're announcing work from home, none of these, very, very few of these companies are allowing people to hop legal and tax jurisdictions to work from different jurisdictions. And this is actually a problem. The term work from anywhere has been used for all sorts of remote working styles. And it is therefore very, very important to differentiate the terms, because then they'll have different compliance consequences. And also, today I was reading a report from Manning School of Business. It's in US, a very, very premier business school. And they said that there is so much of haze and daze in the minds of employees because the workplace policies aren't clear. The return to work policies aren't clear. Are they being offered work from home? Are they being offered work at home? That's a different term altogether, quite often used interchangeably, which has led to massive, massive lawsuits. For one Australian pharmaceutical company, they ended up paying $5 million Australian dollars. And then, or are they allowing to work from different jurisdictions but within the same country? And this is the reason why you need to differentiate these terms properly and then craft policies according to that. The moment you allow your employees to work from different jurisdictions, there's a whole sort of laws, like let's say something as simple as how your job is advertised, how your job descriptions written, are the salaries mentioned? Because in Colorado, I presume a lot of our listeners are from the US. In Colorado, announcing the salary range and the exact salary of the role is mandatory. And that is the reason why we've started to see that people have that, you can work from anywhere in the US, or you could be a resident of anywhere in the US but Colorado, because they don't want to disclose the salaries, or how the information would be passed in a remote work, in a remote setting. So all these things. Now, if I were to talk about one company that really caught my attention, was Spotify, when they announced remote work from anywhere. And that literally took the world by storm. There were like, for the next 10 days, all I could see on my LinkedIn feed was like how everybody was appreciating Spotify's policy. And then I was like, it sounds fishy. Not that they must have done something wrong, but as a lawyer, it just didn't sound all right to me. I dug deep, and what did I find? That you would be allowed to work from different jurisdictions, provided you are eligible for it, your manager approves, your role is something that you can do, blah, blah, blah. So after like 7-8 filters, if out of 100, only 20 people in your company could pass those filters and really apply, do you really want that? Or would you really call that you allow people to work from anywhere? If you are actually taking the route, then you must make these amendments in your policy, in your operation processes, to let a majority of your employees work flexibly and from different locations. You are essentially creating two classes, a lot of disgruntlement, a lot of disappointment, and discrimination amongst your employees. As an employer, do you want to create that? It would be a massive headache for the CHROs, definitely.
Interesting one. I think the two classes of employees is such a bigger issue, between the remote work, people working remote work all the time, and those, for example, in the office all the time and in between, and trying to figure out an async culture versus a sync culture and how you fit in between. I think these are all things that we haven't really been able to test, because we have been, a great point that was made last week, in the last week's episode, that we've been in a pandemic. It hasn't been true remote work, but I think it'll become a bit clearer over the next couple of months. And then I suppose really to try and kind of tie it off, I guess, Frank, what keeps you awake at night when you think about work from anywhere?
Well, before I respond to that, maybe I can go back to one question, really,
Go for it.
which I noticed, or 2 or 3 questions about Social Security, because that's a very big topic, and we talked about taxation, but I think Social Security needs to be really focused on. And there were a question about retirement, pensions. And there is a problem, of course. I mean, from a German perspective, we are quite happy because we have many social security agreements all over the world with different countries. We have the EU coordination rules on social security. So for us, it's quite for sure anywhere we can go when we are retired, our pension will be paid by the German government to that state. But as I've just noticed or learned, if you are from Australia and living in France, there is a problem. And that should be considered when you are choosing your country to work. If you are not able to be covered by your home social security scheme, there may be a problem later on. So this is really a big issue, because taxation, you just paid and then you are gone. Or done. with social security, you would like to have a claim later on against that country for pension or for unemployment benefits, and for sure for health insurance, which I mean is a big topic as well. You need to ensure that you are privately health insured in many cases, because the state system may not be applicable for you, even or neither in your original home country nor in your new host country where you are working for, let's say, 3, 4, 5 months. So you need to be careful that you are covered during that time period.
Very, very good point on that. I think the tricky thing there, where it gets really difficult, is that a lot of these risks, if it goes wrong, can really hurt the employees. But the problem is that I don't see great clarity. Some companies offer, let's say, the financial and tax advice as a perk. Some say no, that's your responsibility. What are you seeing on that, Frank? Are you seeing, is it potentially coming up as a perk for companies to offer or not, or is it mostly the individual employees coming to you, let's say, looking for the advice?
Yeah. With regard to social security, it's always the same. I mean, this is a topic nobody really talks about. It's my impression. If we are the classic expatriates, they will receive maybe a tax briefing from a tax advisor with regard to their personal tax. They are not, or most likely, they will be not receiving any advice on social security. And it's always good to combine these two topics, because they are influencing each other. So a tax briefing should not be only about taxes, but also social security. And well, my clients do know about me and my vision. It should not be one or the other, but it should be both. And therefore, we are always offering both. But it's not, I think it's not the general approach so far.
So one that might surprise a lot of people. I suppose the thing that keeping you awake at night is it's not just about the tax residency; it's also social security. Yeah, great point.
Yeah, and to add that one, it's not about the tax residency, because this is not something which is important for social security.
Yes.
There's a complete different approach, because you are subject to that country's social security where you are performing your work,
Yeah.
not where your domicile or your residency is.
Yeah. So separating the two topics. What about you, Chris? What is keeping you up at night when you think about work from anywhere?
Before I answer that question, I mean, I hear the compliance folks. I said it initially, I'm not a compliance person. Based on my experience, you can control risk. A company might be willing to take a controlled risk. Employees might be willing to take a risk that they're aware of. I mean, we're constantly taking risks in our lives, and but when we're aware of it, and then we have a sense of what could happen, and that makes us feel more secure. So it's not impossible if you have educated people who can make decisions in the room. What keeps me awake at night, I mean, it doesn't really keep me awake, but, and it might be a controversial statement when I thought about it, what could keep me awake, but the society as we are is already split in many ways. And if we split the society further along the lines of those that feel entitled to work from a nice place, a beach or something like that, and the ones that actually have to go to work, I don't think that this split of the society has any good other than to the people who feel entitled that they would like to work from a beach. But that doesn't stop me from being very neutral in advising companies in the right approach that suits them.
It's a great point. And maybe just linking into that, I think it's a very powerful point. Linking in with that, one of the other things as well, just trying to get a sense of it, is that we've seen a lot of it is also, let's say, people from, let's say, North America and Western Europe looking to go to, for example, the beach in Thailand. But are you also seeing as well, Chris, for example, people, let's say the people, expats from India working in the US, or people from, let's say, Eastern Europe working in Western Europe, that from very collectivistic cultures looking to get back to temporarily for their family, for example? Is that coming up yet for discussion, or are you seeing that?
There have been cases where we've seen that some of the requests for work from abroad came with the intention to be if you were like a foreign local hire in another country already, that you want to go back to your family. The example with a lot of Indians working all over the world, that has certainly happened. But I haven't seen that the let's say the intent behind an employee requesting to work from home has played a major role. Okay,
good to know. But ultimately, I think the broader picture of what this could lead to for society down the line is something to watch out for, that keep you awake at night. And Bhagyashree, what about you? What is keeping you awake at night?
So definitely two very prominent challenges, and one is literally the compliance part, because a lot of people want to work from different jurisdictions. Also because I've started to see, personally at some of my clients who are more tenured, they've requested to work from, they're looking to work from different countries where their children are now studying. So their children would be in their, first few years of college and stuff like that. So they just want to, be there with their children and work from that. And all these requests have started to come up. So I would actually suggest that all these people who are looking to work from anywhere, literally you can, if you do not think that the world is your playground, but if you have different countries where you want to work from, definitely go for EORs like Lano. I mean, we do a fabulous job there. Reach out to us, reach out to me at Roll Remotely. The second question or problem that I see is that the choice to work remotely in a lot of these announcements by companies has been left to the employees, which is a problem. An employee may or may not know if they have the cognitive abilities to work remotely in pressure, because last year, businesses were suffering, the world was in a state of lockdown, businesses weren't usual, the pressure wasn't usual. Moving forward, could you handle that kind of pressure working remotely? If not, then of course there's going to be a problem. There would be an injury. It's not only about losing, a lawsuit and compensation claims or paying. Employers are more worried that they would lose out on talent. They would lose out on people who have worked for them. They don't want to do that. So that is the reason why assessing people on their cognitive abilities to work remotely or not is important. And the second thing I would actually say, as a woman, because I have led hybrid remote teams, if you actually hire from a global pool of talent, you're giving meaningful employment to so many underprivileged sections of the society. and they are equally talented, they're equally skilled. It's just that they're in the wrong place. You are tapping into their skills and talent. You are building your company culture, because the more culture come and amalgamate at your company culture gets stronger. So I would say that it is totally doable. I would rather advise, if it's doable for your company, do that using the right partners like Chris, Frank, and us. It definitely, and now Joan, because if you want to know if your company is made liable for taxation or not, do that. But definitely do that. It's no longer going to be a war within one jurisdiction. It's going to be a war that's going to be global.
It's a good one, a good. I can intro back into to Chris. I think one of the points I'd add to that is certainly come back to the high growth tech startups, for example. The cost of losing key talent there is much higher than, for example, the traditional industry. So I think that talent side of it is very, very crucial. Chris, do you want to jump in there as well?
Yeah, just a brief one. I mean, here we're talking about a business case, and the business case contains an ROI, a return on investment. I mean, it's clear that if I make that I have to make an investment in an employee that chooses by himself or herself to work from abroad. I mean, they cannot choose by themselves. I mean, labor law will need an agreement from the company, of course, for that. But what you have to see, I mean, we are not yet there that we can set our own salaries. An employer wants to have a constant employment cost. And by the choice of an employee who says, I want to work from another country, to cause a higher cost to the employer, which they ultimately do by some compliance checks that need to be done with external providers, by taking on the risk that this employee poses potentially, makes again the idea of making it a benefit attractive. But you also have to weigh then, if you have a cost for that, does that weigh up to the attractiveness that you gain on the labor market, your ability to retain top talents, to attract top talents? And that is the question that has to be really discussed well and suitable to a company's culture and situation.
Great. Well, look, I have to say thank you so much, all of you, for all your insights today. I think it was a fascinating discussion. There really are clearly so many risks to watch out for, but also weighing, like you say, the ROI and the business opportunities and the employee benefits with it. I think it's going to be, pick out the popcorn and let's see how this evolves over the next couple of months. But again, massive thank you for all of your efforts in this. I would say as well, again, just to reiterate, if you do need any of the specific tax and legal advice, go to the experts. And on the strategy side, you've got Chris, you've got Frank on the tax side, and you got Bhagyashree in the employment law side as well. I'm more than happy to help in any way I can. And if you have any ideas for future speakers or any questions or topics you want us to address, please feel free to let us know. So with that, I'll leave you all to it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you again next week.